Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Village Council meeting of May 28th. We will begin, as we usually do, with our regular meeting. I'm going to invite, for the first time tonight, we're going to have our invocation from a member of the Village Council staff. I'm going to ask Jason Whitaker if he can come forward and give us the invocation. And we'll follow that with a young man who will lead us in the pledge. Jason, thank you.
Sure. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day here in this beautiful village with these great people. We thank you for all your many blessings on each and every one of us. We pray tonight that this evening, that you'll be with this meeting. Guide us all, Lord, to make the best decisions we can for the village, Lord. And we thank you for all that you do for us. In your holy name I pray. Amen.
Thank you. Now, I'll ask a young man named Eli Brown from Father Capitano High School, who is a junior and is on the cusp of becoming an Eagle Scout, to please lead us in the pledge. I'll ask everyone to rise.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eli. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move to amend the May 28th, 2024 regular meeting agenda and to insert resolution 24-23 honoring Mr. Jeff Batten as item number 3.
Okay. We have a motion.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I don't think there's a need for any debate. I'm going to ask Mr. Jeffrey Batten, who I think is in the audience, to please come forward. This is now official motion. This is a resolution honoring the service of Mr. Jeffrey H. Batten. So let me read this. That whereas the Village Council of Pinehurst, North Carolina, wishes to acknowledge and express its gratitude and appreciation to Jeffrey H. Batten for 29 years of dedicated public service to its citizens, and whereas Mr. Batten served from 1995 to 2001 as the first Parks and Recreation Director for the Village of Pinehurst. And whereas Mr. Batten was promoted to the position of Assistant Village Manager for Operations in 2001. And whereas Mr. Batten consistently exhibited fine moral character, impeccable integrity, exemplary leadership, and acted in the utmost professional manner while leading substantial and long-lasting enhancements that improve the overall quality of life for all citizens of Pinehurst. And whereas Mr. Batten was instrumental in acquiring land to build athletic fields and other park amenities, thereby expanding park services across the village, and in the design and construction of the Cannon Park Community Center. And whereas Mr. Batten played key roles in several capital projects, including the design and construction of Pinehurst Fire Station No. 1, the acquisition and transition of the Given Memorial Library and Tufts Archives to the village, and the downtown amenities plan. And whereas Mr. Batten was fundamental in leading the village through the 1999, 2005, and 2014 U.S. Open Championship events in negotiations with the USGA to designate the Village of Pinehurst as the first U.S. Open anchor site, and in the negotiations with the USGA to establish a second headquarters in the Village of Pinehurst known as Golf House Pinehurst. And whereas Mr. Batten acted as an interim village manager from December 2014 until July 2015, now therefore be resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Pinehurst, North Carolina, in a regular meeting assembled this 28th day of May 2024 as follows. Section 1, that the Village Council hereby expresses on behalf of the citizens of Pinehurst its great appreciation to Jeffrey H. Batten for his 29 years of faithful and dedicated public service to this community, first as Parks and Recreations Director, then as Assistant Village Manager for Operations. Section 2, that a copy of this resolution be spread upon the permanent minutes of the Village of Pinehurst, and a copy thereof, duly executed by the mayor, be presented to Mr. Batten as a token of our gratitude. This resolution passed and was adopted on the 28th day of May, 2024. Congratulations to Mr. Jeffrey H. Batten. Let me officially introduce you to the Village of Pinehurst government's version of Cal Ripken. Where is he?
Well, obviously, this is an incredible surprise. Had no idea that this was coming, but I knew something was amiss when I saw a lot of people sitting over here that would not normally be caught dead in a council meeting. So, I'm sure you'll see a mass exodus in about 3 or 4 seconds when I'm done. All I want to say is I have had the pleasure and privilege to work with the Village of Pinehurst for, as indicated, 29 years, and it has been the greatest experience of my life. I've had great leadership with Jeff and great co-workers like Doug and Natalie prior to him, and this great group of folks that are sitting mostly over here, but there's a few over there as well. It has been, again, an incredible experience. And while I may not miss the work, I will definitely miss my work family. Thank you all very much.
Congratulations once again, Jeff. Okay. We'll give time for the room to clear.
During that time, you want to go ahead and move and approve
Yeah.
Resolution 2423 honoring Mr. Jeff Batten for his service to the Village of Pinehurst?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion adopted. Thank you, Dr. Morgan. All right.
I assume we should take no offense at the revised attendance here.
And who knows what the number of remote viewers will have been? So we'll be anxious to see that report tomorrow. Okay, let us return to our agenda, and we'll begin with some reports, and we'll start with the village manager.
All right, thank you, Patrick. I'd just like to say a few more things about that guy back there, Jeff Batten. You know, I've been here for 9 years, and it has just been an immense pleasure to work with you in helping to guide the staff toward outcomes that are beneficial to our community. You know, a lot of folks look at Jeff Batten and his departure and look back upon his history. 29 years with the Village of Pinehurst, right? All that knowledge, all that institutional knowledge, and we value that. And because of that, it's going to be hard to watch him go, but we're really happy for him. But it's more than that. You know, we have a really strong culture within our village staff. And a key component of that is teamwork. And I credit a lot of that to Jeff because he's dedicated to those people that work around him, while he's dedicated to also providing great outcomes for our community. And one thing about Jeff Batten is it is never, ever about Jeff Batten. And the strong example that he sets in that regard reverberates across our staff. And it's the foundation, I think, for that strong sense of teamwork that we all share. So thanks, Jeff. I wish you the best of luck. And I know you're going to be around here, for many years to come. But we hope you have a great time in your retirement. doing the traveling plans and things like that you want to do. But again, it's really been a pleasure. And now I'll turn my attention to another member of our staff, Carlton Cole. We had, I think it was 89 applicants to come and try to follow in the footsteps of Jeff Batten from all across the United States, several states. A really strong candidate pool. And the best of the best came from 3 different states. But I'm really proud of the fact that one of our own wound up at the top of that heap. And so Carlton Cole is going to be our next Assistant Village Manager for Operations. He's got some really important requirements and duties associated with the U.S. Open here in his current role, so he's not going to make that transition until the U.S. Open is complete. But really happy for you, Carlton, and you got great things ahead of you. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jeff. Certainly, I think like all of us want to reiterate what a pleasure it's been working with Jeff Batten, and he was really a results-oriented administrator. And I think you said it well. It was never about Jeff. It was just sort of getting the results, getting the task and mission accomplished, and that's been to the benefit of all the residents of Pinehurst. Let me go down a few reports from the past couple weeks. Last week, there was an NAC meeting held here, and we had an excellent presentation from the Moore County water guru, Randy Gold, about the issue of backflow, which created a lot of interest among the NAC members. And I think the NAC meetings, by having a regular guest speaker, let's see if Kristen's out there, she puts together a good agenda, that there is a real renewed interest among the attendees, and they don't hesitate to ask questions and bring up issues. So if you're looking for more information about backflow, you can get it from your NAC representative, or you can go to our website and contact Kristen, and I think the presentation is up there, matter of fact. Also had the opportunity to attend the Moore 100 members meeting at the World Golf Hall of Fame, and I want to encourage people to, between now and July 1, that's available to the public for free, to go in there and see the World Golf Hall of Fame. It's really a first-class presentation, a lot of history, and it's right here in our village, and it's going to be here for a long, long time. So, but take the opportunity through the end of June, because after that, I think there'll be an admission charge, not unexpected. I also wanted to share an interesting item, at least I found it interesting, at the Historic Preservation Commission this last week. They do a very good job sort of watching out for the interests of the village and new construction and renovations to make sure everything is congruous with our history and the village architect. And for the first time, someone came before the village, the first time in at least my memory, and asked to replace 2 homes with 1. So they were taking 2 lots. They're going to demolish the homes there, and they presented the new home that they hope to put on there soon. But it was sort of a good turn of events as to how people are looking to how they can live here in the village of Pinehurst. And if anyone's in doubt, people really want to live and move to Pinehurst. It's just not that polling data we get from Zillow. We're seeing them firsthand coming here and changing the makeup of our lots. This past weekend, there was a phenomenal Sandhills Motoring Expo. Went for 3 days. There were lots of people, and we had great weather. And the village just looked spectacular. We got a lot of great comments from people. There were plenty of people from out of town, from Florida and Georgia, Virginia. And it's just another event that's put on here in the village that we can be proud of as a village. And we can be particularly fond of the support we lend to this organization by helping close certain streets and do other things to make their event come off very well. So I compliment those people on the staff in particular who made a lot of the events work very smoothly. This afternoon, I attended the Tri-Cities Working Group today, made up of representatives from Southern Pines, Aberdeen, and Pinehurst. Myself, village manager, and John Taylor attended. And we had a presentation from the North Carolina League of Municipalities staff on what's going on in Raleigh, more or less. And then we had a discussion, and the discussion basically centered around all the Tri-Cities representatives reaffirming their individual support for the retention of the ETJ areas in and around our communities, as well as anywhere else in Moore County. So that issue may return, but there seems to be unanimity. Also down the road, here's a couple other things I want to mention there. I've been encouraging folks to help us all, and the village has done it officially. If you just walk around the village, you can see it. It's obvious, to tidying up the village, because we're going to have about 250,000 people coming here soon, and they'll be visiting us from all over the world. And the reason I mention this is that coming up in the month of June, there are a variety of organizations that are having their own neighborhood cleanups. And I'm going to participate in one sponsored by the Sand Hills Rotary on the 1st, by the GOP Women on the 3rd, and by Pinehurst number 6 Property Owners Association on the 8th. So I encourage residents to see what they can do in their own neighborhood, because there's probably going to be a lot of people walking or driving around the village, and we really want to look our best. We really do look our best as I drove around this weekend, which is a compliment to the village staff, what they've been doing. Two other items. One, I want to compliment the Rock the Village. For those of you who have not seen those rocking chairs out there, there are 25 of these rocking chairs. And if you go to the Village Welcome Center, they actually have I brought it with me, have a little pamphlet, and they can tell you about the artist in each one of these rocking chairs. Almost all of them are residents of Pinehurst and our neighbors. You'll recognize many names. But I've had comments from others about, where do those rocking chairs come from? Who does that? And I say, well, it's probably a neighbor of yours. You can go look it up at the Welcome Center. But they're very attractive and creating a good buzz in the neighborhood. Lastly, just a reminder, the next council meeting, we adjusted our schedule because of the U.S. Open. So I just want to remind everyone, our next council meeting is actually going to be next week. And then it won't be followed for 3 weeks to the end of June after the U.S. Open. So for those of you who are listening, if you set your VCR, or that's a little dated, whatever you set now, you may make an adjustment to that. Having completed all that, I will now turn to Dr. Morgan for any of his reports.
Thank you. First, we did have another meeting with Central Pines Regional Council this past week. The main focus of the meeting was on homelessness, and certainly participated with that. Not one of our huge social issues here in Pinehurst, so there's not a whole lot to report from that. I want to reiterate all the very kind and appropriate comments and the truthful comments on Jeff Batten. I will tell you, Jeff, when I see a huge team here, and your team, show up, that's a testament to the respect and affection that they have for you, and that in itself shows a lot. And then when I see you finish your comments, 40 people of the team stand up and say, okay, we've had enough. It's very clear they're expecting you to take this last council meeting for the team. So we do appreciate it. And so while you're not going to be required to be here in the future, you are welcome to join us anytime. So thank you for everything done. Also, want to comment some on Carlton, okay? People don't get promoted when they do poorly in their jobs. People get promoted when they're at the top. And if you look at the performance of the Pinehurst Fire Department over these many years, it's very clear of the performance that's been given. So the outstanding professionalism, the excellence in which you bring to the job, it's welcomed. and your promotion well deserved. Thank you for joining us in that regard. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. John Taylor.
Couple of things. Different governing bodies have different accepted behaviors, and we don't share, thankfully, one of them, but there could have been one today that's appropriate in the British Parliament, which is, as you were reading, that we could have all been saying here, here, because the description of the things that Jeff Batten has been involved in and the scope of them, not just the time period, it was really extraordinary. So congratulations again, Jeff. Mr. Mayor, without intending to criticize you, I think you buried the lead on the backflow announcement. In the past, when you needed to get your valve tested, you had to find a plumber, and you didn't know who was licensed and who wasn't, or what they were going to charge you, but the Board of Commissioners now has an approved list of people who will do this, and it's free. And the only sad thing that I get to report is I actually sent my check in for having had mine tested 2 weeks ago. So I missed this year, but I will not miss next year. So if you haven't had it tested, yes, this year, check out the the Moore County Board of Commissioners and look for that program, because at minimum, it'll probably save you $100. I attended the SMPO meeting as well. Some interesting, it was not the entire presentation, but some interesting commentary on the traffic circle. We'll probably get to be discussing that at a future meeting. I was at the Moore 100 meeting, the NAC meeting. I was not at the Triangle J meeting today. I actually wasn't sure whether I was supposed to be or not, but I was at the Moore County Board of Commissioners meeting. They discussed both the ongoing long-term plan to increase the water supply in the county. A little more to say on that probably in new business. And they also had a little discussion on the Senate Bill 166 and reactions there. Although it is a work session, they did invite a few people to speak. And I thought it was a good exchange of ideas there. I think that's it for me.
Barbara Ficklin.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. I too attended the SMPO meeting and watched the presentation on the traffic circle and look forward to many conversations in the future. On the 20th of May, I had a very interesting day. It began early, and that was the day we had our budget meeting. That was followed by, that was a morning meeting, followed in the afternoon by the NAC meeting. And that was followed, for me, with an evening meeting with the Pinehurst Business Partners. And we met at an ostrich farm in Robbins, which was absolutely fascinating. Took a tour of the farm, and they had wonderful hors d'oeuvres, as you might imagine, with ostrich meat. And it was wonderful, and I highly recommend it. And I know I did not ride an ostrich. They are immense. The other thing I was going to tell you about is, I don't know how many of you know about Centerpiece Magazine. It's a magazine that is published by PBS. And on the cover, I just got mine yesterday, is a picture of the clubhouse, and it says, "It's a beautiful day in Pinehurst." And there is a PBS program coming up on June the 11th in the program, hour-long, about the history of Pinehurst, stories, et cetera. So wanted to let you know about it so that you could tune it in or record it on your VCR.
Yes, thank you.
One last thing. I would just like to say a special thank you to Jeff Batten. Also, as a resident, I've worked with Jeff over the years, and that includes 20 of your 29 years. Obviously, not every year, but through the many projects that we've had in my neighborhood. And now having the opportunity to work with you on the council, I just want to say thank you. You are a gentleman to work with, delightful. I have never heard an unkind word spoken on your behalf, so thank you. And to Carlton Cole, congratulations. Look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilman Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second all the comments about Jeff, both the chair of the beautification committee and myself, but greatly appreciate everything you've done. And I've been around for a while and I've watched, and it's been nothing but great activity. Appreciate it very much. And Carlton, congratulations. I'm sure you'll have some big footsteps to fall in, but I'm sure you'll do just fine. So I'm honored to be mistaken for John Taylor in the meeting that we had today with the Tri-Cities. Thank you very much. I attended the NAC also with a number of other council members, and I just want to report that the budget report from Dana was highly appreciated. It's good that we can get that information out to the communities and they can forward it to understand what's going on in the village. This month, I did attend the Port Liberty Regional Land Use Advisory Commission, and it's a very interesting situation. I think the village manager covered what they did during the last meeting, but I just articulated that again. It's essentially to review land use issues that relate to the potential impact on the mission that they have at Fort Liberty, not just their training mission, but also the mission to preserve species, endangered species, such as the red-cockaded woodpecker, because they control to a great extent a lot of forested area and some other habitat, which is very important. As an interest, the first quarter of the Land Use Commission's activity was that there was 271 cases that were submitted by local governments, including Moore County, which land use decisions or potential actions that could in fact impact them. So out of those 171 cases that were submitted by local governments, there was 20 identified as potentially impacting the mission over there. And so they had to then discuss with each local government what in fact the resolution of that would be if in fact it does impact them on a critical basis. Moore County, for example, had eight cases submitted, and there was one comment back. I think it was related to the Duke Power wanting to construct towers at each of their substations, and to the extent that they could impact the airspace and so forth. So some of the cases that were submitted, I think this is interesting that they have this, and we are in fact, although we're on the periphery of the border, I guess it's 2 miles from the base, 5 miles, 5 miles from the base, we still are a member of the commission. So here's the first quarter impacts that were looked at. These are the ones that they, in fact, were considered as they needed to comment back. There was 2 aviation hazards, 1 potential accident, potential zone. The red-cockaded woodpecker habitat issue appeared in 2 of them. The noise level there was 9 submitted that could be a problem because they're sensitive to the noise impact to the surrounding communities. And low-level aviation corridor impact, there was 6 of those that were assessed. And some other environmental impact to the extent of 7 of them. So it's rather interesting that land use decisions that affect Fort Liberty are in fact reviewed by the commission, and in fact, if it looks like there's going to be some impact on their mission, they will work with the local governments to try to come to a resolution as to whether or not that could be an issue or not. So I thought it was very interesting, and then it's continuing. I'm very looking forward to being on that in the future. I think it'll be very interesting, and hopefully we won't have any impact issues, although we touched the border there, so it's a very interesting commission, something that most people don't know about, but it's important to the community and to the area. Is it?
Thank you for sharing that. I learned a few new things there when you just went down that list. All righty, we can move to the next item on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. And all the items listed on that are considered routine or have been discussed at length in previous meetings, and we can enact them by one motion. No separate discussion will be needed to be held unless requested by a member of the village council. So I will entertain a motion or request to have a discussion on anything.
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion adopted. Let us move to the next item on our agenda, item number 6, which is the quarterly financial statements as of March 31st, 2004, which is the end of our third quarter of the fiscal year. So, Dana, your show.
Okay, there we go. All right. Good evening, Council. Looking at the quarterly financial statements year-to-date through March 31st, 2024. Starting with our budget to actual summary. Year-to-date through March, we have collected a little over $23 million in revenues, including nearly all of the property taxes, with the exception of motor vehicle taxes that will continue to be collected through the end of the fiscal year. That is about $300,000 more than we had budgeted through 3 quarters, and about almost $2.3 million more than the previous year. And that big increase from FY23 is driven by the tax rate, investment income, and sales tax revenues being higher than the previous year. With expenditures, we are below budget by about $2.7 million through the third quarter, but about $610,000 more than we were through the third quarter in 2023. The increase compared to last year is really driven by the salaries and benefits increases that were planned in the budget. And then with capital, we are about halfway spent, or a little over halfway spent compared to what we had budgeted. We'll look at the capital expenditures to date a little later in more detail, and pretty much flat with where we were at with capital last year. Overall, we're through the third quarter, we have about a $6 million increase or change in fund balance. This is pretty typical this time of year. Last year it was over $9 million. That was driven by the over $5 million realization of the ARPA funding that we had during the third quarter. That was a one-time item. But you'll see this $6 million change in fund balance decrease as we get to the end of the fiscal year, since we have recognized most of our revenues year to date, but we will continue to spend through the final quarter. So that puts us at an ending fund balance as of the third quarter of over $26 million. It is not wanting to scroll. Thank you, Doug. The next slide is a graphical representation of all the numbers we were just looking at to help visualize. The wide bars are all of the expenditures split between operating and capital, and the narrow bars inside are the revenues and other sources. So you can see kind of the trend comparing last year to this fiscal year. In terms of expenditures, you see that same kind of slope to the bars, and the revenues you can see we have much more recognized than we've spent so far this year. That's the gap that will close as the year finishes out the final quarter. Now looking at our revenues in some more detail, you can see that comparison that we were budgeting for $26.7 million in total revenues, and of that, we've collected a little over 23 million. And what's remaining to be collected in that last quarter is primarily sales tax revenues, but we have some other items as well, such as the USGA, the US Open licensing fee that we'll receive in June, as well as other sales and services. So you can see property taxes, we've collected 13.4 million through the end of that third quarter. That's about 99.7% of the annual budget. At that point last year, we had over 100% collected. You'll see in a couple slides how that compares to the actual total levy, where we're pretty comparable to what we had collected last year. And I do expect that we'll collect that remainder to get us up to the 99.9% collection rate that we historically have realized. With the sales taxes, we had over 6.2 million collected through the third quarter, but that includes 2 months of estimates. The actuals are only through January in terms of the cash that we've received for sales taxes. We had over about 442,000, which is a 7.7% growth compared to March last year. That exceeds our budgeted growth of 5% and the statewide average of 3.4%. Moore County historically has been above the statewide averages, fortunately. Investment income, we continue to see over 5% yield on our investment portfolio, and this has been significantly higher than last year's investment earnings. That's okay. So looking just quickly at our property tax collections to date, this is just the real and personal, not including the motor vehicles. The yellow bar of 12.9 million for FY24 is the levy as reported to us by Moore County. The green bar is what we have budgeted, and that for FY24 is 12,889,000, and the red bar is our collections through the third quarter, which we're at 99.6% collected on the levy. At this point last year, we were at 99.9% of the levy. But as I said, I expect we'll already, given what we've gotten in April and May, we're already at our 99.9% collection rate that we typically see. All right, moving on to our expenditures for operating, the salaries, benefits, and other operating, excluding the capital. We have a total budget of 24 million, and we have spent about 15.3. That's only slightly more than what we had spent last year. So we are kind of seeing that budget to actual variance that we historically have realized so far this fiscal year. Our personnel expenses are the largest portion of that, about half of the budget. We have 1.1 million in budget to actual variance through year to date through the third quarter. That's about 9.5%, which is more than the 8% budget to actual variance that we had estimated in the FY24 SOP. We also have some underspending to date in terms of what had been planned for road patching and the downtown parking lot resurfacing project, which has been tabled for now. The PDO rewrite funding, which has not been spent yet and will carry forward to next fiscal year. And we also have funding for the multimodal plan and STR monitoring that has not been spent. The STR monitoring is about 20,000 of that 74,000 total for those two initiatives. And some of the systems that are available have been evaluated by staff, and we will carry that $20,000 forward into next fiscal year to continue that if needed, to find a system that potentially meets our needs if there is one. Looking at capital, you can see the budgeted capital for this fiscal year of about $4.5 million is quite a bit less than we had in FY23, and we've spent a little over half of what we had planned through the third quarter in the year-to-date budget.
Remind me last year's capital number. What was the big thing in there?
We did the Cannon Park turf on the baseball field. That was the biggest item I can think of off the top of my head. That was about 1.3 million, I believe.
That's fine.
So that makes up the significant portion of that decrease. We did reappropriate a significant amount of funding for capital from FY '23 into FY '24. So this is just an update on those, the largest of those projects that were still ongoing. And you can see from the summary there that out of the total amounts either already spent or encumbered, meaning we have purchase orders and the work has planned to be done, or items are on order, that we have pretty much nearly spent all of those funds that were reappropriated for those projects. These are projects where we do also have funding in FY '24, new dollars that were appropriated. And so those we plan to roll forward, if anything that isn't spent by the end of the fiscal year, into FY '25. We do have significant items, work that has been kind of held off for the open and that won't be able to be completed until FY '25 to use up those funds. And cash and investments. We're at a total balance of $26.2 million in cash and investments as of the end of the third quarter. It's about a $2.4 million increase from March 31st of 2023, which is really driven by the additional revenues that came in with relatively flat expenditures year over year. You can see the trend is kind of following the last two fiscal years in terms of that cash balance, and we'll see that continue to go down slightly as we get through June. For the library expansion capital project fund, this really hasn't changed since the previous quarter, since there wasn't much work done that actually cost us anything in that time frame. But there is a budget amendment on the agenda later tonight that you'll see to accommodate the architect agreement that was approved by council at the last meeting. And finally, we'll move on to the SMPO Special Revenue Fund, which was newly created in the third quarter. Since activities were just getting started, we spent about $1,000, just over $1,000 in the first quarter. We have quantified additional expenditures of about $20,000 for village staff time that we are allowed to be reimbursed for their work on SMPO tasks in lieu of what the director would have done, since that position has not been filled. And all of those expenditures are covered 80% from federal grant dollars that are passed through the NCDOT and 20% from the member dues. We'll get all of those on a reimbursement basis. So in July, we'll send invoices and get reimbursed for all of the expenditures through June 30th in the SMPO Special Revenue Fund. Any questions?
Counsel?
Dan, if I had it right, we were running round numbers $6 million ahead through the end of the third quarter. We don't expect to get a lot of revenue in the fourth quarter because we typically don't. And we have about $2.5 million in capital between what we've spent and what we budgeted. So if we were to spend all of that, my guess is we might not, because I assume we're going to have a little 10 or 12-day hiatus here coming up, at least. That would leave us with something like a $3.5 million anticipated surplus for the end of the year. Is that a reasonable guesstimate?
We're at 6 now. We'll get an additional 3 in revenue plus what we'd spend in operating. It sounds reasonable if I had to.
I was assuming nothing, an additional 3 in revenue minus 2.5 in capital.
Right, because we'll.
Okay, that's fine.
I can look at that, but.
Am I correct that with regard to sales taxes, there's a little bit of seasonality, and our fiscal fourth quarter is typically our largest quarter? Because that would be the highest season for the resort, having April and May both in that quarter.
I can look at that. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that there is definitely seasonality involved. We typically will see a spike, for December, from holiday shopping, for example. But I can look at that in terms of seasonality.
Just curious. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Nothing else?
Other questions? Okay, I don't believe we need to, you're looking for us to adopt anything. You're giving us an update. So thank you for the thoroughness of the information. And we'll look forward to the full year report, I guess, sometime in what is it, usually September, October?
Yes, usually September.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Dana. Okay.
So I move to recess the regular meeting and enter the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We now have entered into the FY 2025 budget public hearing. This is something that we do, required to do, and we have a proposed budget and strategic operating plan. The council has the statutory responsibility to adopt a budget for the coming fiscal year by the end of June, and we're on track to do that. We'll now entertain any comments. This has been up on the website since, I guess, last week sometime. So if anybody signed up, we'll call them. And if you hadn't signed up, but you feel like talking, you're welcome to join us also.
We do have an introductory, a brief introductory presentation. If
Okay,
we may
go right
through that
ahead.
first, Mr. Mayor, please.
Go ahead.
Yep, so we have this summary of the FY25 budget that's included within the village's strategic operating plan. This is just focusing on the fiscal year 25 annual budget. It does not include the five-year forecast, since what the council is adopting or will be adopting in June is just the annual budget for fiscal year 2025. But it is part of the larger document that is based off of council's mission, vision, values for the village, as well as priorities and these areas of focus that were determined during the retreat and affirmed when council approved the FY25 balanced scorecard in January. So looking at the budget, the overall budget is $32.5 million. That's over an 11% increase compared to the FY24 budget. We are doing that while reducing the tax rate by a half cent from 23 cents in this fiscal year to 22.5 cents for next fiscal year. It includes a $6.1 million appropriated fund balance. This is for transfers to the Library Expansion Capital Project Fund and some other significant capital projects that you'll see later. And once we factor in our estimated budget to actual variance, we expect the ending fund balance to be 52% of the budgeted expenditures, which is in compliance with the council-adopted policy. The FY 2025 plan includes funding and work being done for 4 initiative action plans. First, the updating the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. The work is going to be done or begin in fiscal year 25, but there's no new dollars being appropriated in the budget. That's going to be funded from $200,000 that was appropriated in FY 22 and has been carried forward since then. And that now that we are in the phase where we will be getting the request for quotes and qualifications out to consultants, that work will begin going forward. We also have $400,000 appropriated for property acquisition to relocate the public services complex. We have about $1.4 million to retrofit the Wicker Park athletic fields with synthetic turf, and $4.2 million in estimated expenditures for construction, the design work and construction on the new Given Memorial Library building. The $4.2 million is the total expenditures that we are estimating will occur in FY25. There's already $1.4 million in the capital project fund for the library, so the net amount that we expect to transfer from the general fund balance in FY25 is $2.8 million to fund the remainder of those estimated expenditures. So in total, it's about just under $6 million of investment for those 4 initiatives. Looking at the revenues, primarily driven by the property taxes and sales taxes. The property tax revenue is a 2% decrease based on the half-cent decrease in the tax rate. We're assuming about a 0.5% growth in the property tax base based on construction levels and estimated new homes. Sales tax revenues are expected to increase about 4.8% over FY24's budget. And you see a significant portion of revenues in this year's budget that are used essentially to balance the budget is 6.1 million of fund balance appropriation, as I had mentioned, for the library, which had been intended to be taken from fund balance, as well as some other significant non-recurring capital projects.
Dana, do you recall or remember what is the number of new homes were expected in this fiscal year?
I believe it's 100? It's either 75 or 100.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and looking at expenditures, you can see in the graph, salaries and benefits are about half. That's typical of our budget. It's usually above 50%. This year we have the significant other financing use that is about 9%. That's the $2.8 million transfer from the general fund to the capital project fund for the library. So that is skewing the percentages in that graph. But these salaries and benefits include about $655,000 of increase for the cost of living adjustment of 4.1% for staff and merit increases. It includes 2 new full-time equivalents for 2 positions that equate to about $127,000 for salaries and benefits. That's the stormwater technician and fleet service apprentice. And the village will continue to pay 100% of the employee health and dental insurance benefits and retirement contributions of 18.64% for regular employees and just over 20% for law enforcement. When we look at the expenditures by function, they're generally the same as last year, but we do see that other financing use jumping in and taking up a larger slice of the pie. The cultural and recreation also increased about 2.5% from the synthetic turf project, money for athletic field light upgrades, and $124,000 for a new accessible van that will be added to the fleet. So the increases in those 2 areas kind of proportionally then decrease the other areas, and public safety is the one that is most impacted. That's usually closer to 35%, but with the increases in the other areas, that slice got a little smaller this year. Looking at our capital for this year, for FY25, it totals 5.1 million. We've mentioned several of these significant projects already, the turf for Wicker Park Field, our continued investments in pedestrian facilities, sidewalks, walkways, and stormwater drainage projects. We'll be getting 2 new garbage trucks, the funding for the public services property acquisition, the Cannon Park athletic field light and pole upgrades, 5 police patrol vehicles, which is 1 more than we funded in FY24. And we also have a streetscape improvement funding for downtown and the van that was just mentioned. There are also plenty of other kind of recurring replacements of vehicles and other equipment.
Dan, one question on that. When do we have to post a commitment for a vehicle? For example, let's say we know the lead time on some vehicles is pretty long, as a matter of fact. A garbage truck, I'll use that as an example. I have no idea what it is, but I think it's
About a
not
year, I think.
tomorrow that you can get one.
Right.
So when do we post that we've actually spent the money? Is it when we make the order, or when we can't spend the money until after July 1st?
Correct. So for those items, particularly like the garbage trucks, for example, you're absolutely right. I think it tends to take about a year, maybe even longer. And so those, we will place the order in July as soon as we can, typically. And, but we won't actually show it for the purpose of the financial reports, the budget to actual financial reports, for example. It won't be in the actuals until we receive it and pay for it.
But it shows up, we cannot actually make the commitment until after July 1st?
In most cases, we can do a letter of intent, which is non-binding,
Okay.
to at least let someone know that we plan
But
to
if they
purchase it
demand
once
any kind
July
of
1st
deposit or
comes.
otherwise, yeah.
Right, but we don't make deposits. We cannot do any binding sort of commitment unless we were to get certain approvals from
Sort
council
of
and amend
binding
the
in many
budget.
ways, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yep. So that tends to be why we have some funds that we roll forward to the next fiscal year. while we're waiting for items to arrive that we've already ordered.
Understand, welcome
Yep.
to municipal accounting.
Yes.
Dana, just following up on that, so if we send out a contract or whatever on July 1st, do we not then record that as a liability?
We have it as an encumbrance, so essentially, yes, that means we've earmarked those funds. They are no longer considered available when we're looking to purchase something else. And I have to pre-audit and put my name to the fact that there are funds available, an appropriation available. That's the budget minus anything actual spent, minus any open purchase orders effectively that we know are out there
Is
to
an
be paid.
encumbrance like an obligation?
Correct. Yep, that is, we have a legal order, that we're obligated to pay if we get the goods
You
or
can send out
services.
RFQs, but we can't respond to the RFQ with anything positive yet until we have the money July 1st, right?
Or definitely not sign the agreement
Okay.
and issue a purchase order. Yes.
And all these items that we talk about when they're put on as either a liability and they're an asset, all these are following standardized accounting rules that we get audited on every year.
Every year, yes.
And we're getting awards on doing this. So from my understanding, we're doing what we're supposed to do.
Yep, absolutely. We have great staff that take care of this stuff day in and day out. Yes. All right, that's all I had.
Any council comments or questions? More? No? Okay. All right, we do have two individuals that signed up. First one is Joe Busher. Please come up and sit to the microphone. Oh, okay, that'll come up later. Okay, thank you. And Tricia Notaro? Okay, I have one question for you, Tricia. I thought I knew the name of every street in this community. You live on Backspin Lane. What a great name. Okay. That's okay. Thank you. All right, that's a great name. All right, now, then I will entertain a motion, unless we have some other discussion on this topic, or if there's someone else who'd like to come forth and talk on the topic. No? Go ahead.
I move to adjourn the public hearing and re-enter the regular meeting.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So adopted? Okay. Now we can go on to item 10 right now. Discuss and consider a contract for legal services for FY 2025. Obviously, Denny, you're still in the chair. Go right ahead.
Yes, so the terms of the contract are unchanged from previous years with just an update to the monthly rate. It's a 2% increase, which is historically what we've done, at least in recent years. So the monthly cost will be $5,146, totaling $61,752 for the fiscal year. There's a slight increase, a $20 increase in Mr. Newman's hourly rate, up to $415 per hour if we were to be charged for any hours in excess of the monthly retainer, which we have not been in the past.
All righty. Questions, comments from council members?
I have a couple of questions. We received in our budget meeting an organization chart, and that organization chart showed a direct line between the village attorney and the council. And the contract really precludes the council from direct communication with the attorney, initiating direct communication with the attorney. And instead going through the village manager, and I'm just kind of curious as to why.
Questions about the contract, on that particular part of the contract that Councilwoman Ficklin raised?
I think that the contract, I don't have the contract in front of me here. If I recall my reading of the provision you're referencing correctly, It doesn't preclude contact between council members and our attorney, but it does preclude direction from individual council members and our attorney, and that's because direction has to come from the collective will of the council, not from individual council members. And I think that another part of why the contract language is written the way it is that it's impractical on an ongoing daily basis for all matters for direction to come from the consensus of a council that has to be formed in a meeting. You know what I'm saying? So the idea is that I have the best of all folks. I have the best understanding of what the council wants to achieve, and I have the most ongoing communication with council members about a wide variety of issues that you are contemplating, and therefore it's more efficient for that communication flow to come through me.
I have a second question. The contract says that the attorney will practice law on behalf of the village in a manner designed to be preventative in nature, and I'm curious to know what that means.
As I described in an email communication earlier today, my understanding of that language is that Mike Newman is going to advise you in a way that is designed to prevent unnecessary litigation, especially in ways that invite litigation in cases that we stand a pretty good chance of losing, because it's very costly. All litigation is costly. You look at the one that we've been embroiled in over the last 2 years, where we're fundamentally right on, right? But the lawsuit happened anyway, and it's costing us a lot of money. So we want to be preventive. We want to advise the council to be preventive of unnecessary litigation.
However, at the same time, based upon the input from an attorney, we still eventually will make the decision as to the action we wish to take or not take in a particular circumstance. I mean, that should be clear. I'm sure it's clear to everyone here, so.
I had only, in the back and forth from the memo provided by one of our constituents, the only thing that I flagged was this statement that a detailed report of services provided shall be submitted to the village manager. It's my impression that that has not actually happened on a regular basis. And this approach will come up again in July when we get to talking about enforcement. If it's in the contract, it ought to be done. If we really don't think there's a need for it, we ought to take it out of the contract. I don't like having provisions in the contract which are pretty straightforward, which we are choosing not to pursue. That's the whole reason we have contracts, is to find responsibilities and rights.
That's a good comment.
I don't know what I would glean if we had such a report. I might, after seeing it for a couple of months, say, I don't care. But I don't think it should be a contractual provision if it's simply not being performed.
Remind me, does that put a time requirement on how often we're supposed to get a report?
By the 15th of the month following, month of service.
So it's a monthly
Yes,
report?
it's monthly to the village manager.
I get that now.
Who can then apprise us as deemed appropriate.
Yeah, I remember that section too. I just, I
And I-
searched my memory as to whether or not I had once read one or something, and I hadn't, so I would agree we need to have some clarification there, or a suggestion from the village manager of maybe it doesn't have to be monthly, maybe it's quarterly, I don't know, something that provides a little touch base for the council.
We did, some of you were present for a conversation about this very topic last year or the year before. I don't recall which it was last year. And I think your point is fair, John. If we're going to have language in the contract, we probably ought to do that. And so we could make the change. If you're going to make a change, my recommendation is that the change should be something along the lines of, if Mr. Newman has done work on behalf of the village in excess of the 30 hours per month, and therefore is looking for the additional compensation tied to his hourly rate, then he will submit a report.
At a minimum, I think quarterly would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with amending it to be quarterly. I don't know how often that happens, that he spends more than 30. And again, this is no reflection on the quality of service being provided. It's more just a contractual point. Maybe quarterly is sufficient. How frequently has he spent more than 30 hours a month over the course of the last year or two?
I think in the last couple of years, more months than not, he has expended more than 30 hours. And in several of those months, far in excess of 30 hours.
And a lot of that related to the one specific issue?
Two issues, the Kevin Drum lawsuit and the whole STR debate.
I think if that's the case, that we should receive some form of reporting. I would be fine with making it quarterly, not monthly. We're not trying to micromanage the budget to that level of detail. I would agree, by the way, related to Barb's first question, if I have a question that is legal in nature, I should not contact the attorney. I should come to you with that, just to consolidate it, and you may have the answer anyway. It may not be necessary. What the more strategic relationship between the parties is, that's a different question. But I agree that individually, we should not be contacting unless it be really extraordinary circumstance.
I have one last why question. The contract also indicates that required attendance during council meetings, and I have never seen our attorney.
The contract requires him to attend council meetings for which I have advised him he needs to attend.
And what would examples might be?
There were a few instances where he was present during key issues associated with the STR debate a couple of years ago. He was present for issues associated with the rewrite of the HPC guidelines a couple of years ago.
I recall him present for regarding the lawsuit with the former council member.
Certainly, all of those things, he's in attendance for those conversations.
And I can imagine we may want him there in July whenever we take up the general.
Actually, I
issue of the
specifically requested that in an open meeting here before, that we have both Mr. Newman and Alex here for both those.
Yeah, and I mean, the part of that, I think part of Mike's thought process on that, about when he should be in this room, is about protecting all of us from communication that's made in public between you and he that could be used against us by somebody that wants to file a lawsuit against us on any number of topics.
I think, as I read the language, it is not a requirement. It is at the direction of the village manager. I will say I have a good friend who was counsel for a number of years to another town in North Carolina, and one which is sometimes used in our Baldrige and Balanced Scorecard as a comp. And he never told me, he said I was at every meeting.
But was he an employee of that community,
No.
or was he a contractor?
No, he was a contractor. He was not a full-time employee of that
Community.
municipality. That doesn't mean that they were right and we're wrong. That's just the way they chose to write that language. This clearly, as I read it, it does not require that he be here or that he be required at all HPC meetings or planning and zoning meetings.
So I think what I'm hearing is that we would like to make a change about the report on a quarterly basis. So I think that's Is that
Could it
sort of
be
conf-
something, not itemized, but summarized by type of expense or?
Yeah, something it's not designed to be burdensome to either our village attorney or staff, but it's something that, summary, so that we have a good flavor or taste of what went on. And
Well, that does beg the question. I mean, it's written in there that approximately 30 hours a month, and de facto, we have not necessarily been keeping track of that. From what you're saying, and certainly from the work that I've seen, I would expect it to be significantly more than that, but it seems like it's been more of just a monthly payment that we're doing, and then we're getting the services that we need, whether they're higher or they're lower. So it goes back to begging the question as to why did it evolve to that versus doing what we have? My assumption is it usually evolves these things because it's more practical. Okay? But there's still a question.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I'd add that the arrangement we have with Mike Newman is one in which we almost treat him as more than just a contracted supporter. He's a member of the team, he's almost like an employee. And when we need him, we reach out to him, and he's responsive to us, regardless of what the contract says. And I think that a lot of that has evolved along with the eventual, I don't know when it happened before I started working here, but the departure from what's written in the contract about this monthly reporting thing. It's in Patrick and Jeff, you'll probably recall from the conversation we had last summer about this time that, when you look at his hourly rate, I just did the math again, I think, that works out, if we're paying him by the hour, we're paying for about 12 hours a month. And
But at the
so,
same time, it's my experience that most people in the legal profession keep a very careful log of their time.
yeah,
And when and what client they're spending their time on. So I suspect that when he goes beyond 30 hours, he knows, and he can document to us to justify the additional hourly expense.
and he doesn't. He never has.
On what basis do we then pay him an additional amount over what we pay him?
Never asked for more.
We believe that he is spending more time pro bono.
yeah, I don't know
I mean,
if pro
he-
bono is the
He
appropriate
shared with
word
me in a
here.
conversation this morning that this weekend, while the rest of us were enjoying Memorial Day weekend, he was in the office working on a response to a legal brief for us.
So, well, I think, again, I think we just need to regularize the contractual understanding we have so that there is just some type of report that will at least familiarize all of us with what's gone on and what's been done.
So if we sharpen our pencils and we go to regularize, what does that exactly mean?
That means we get the report that we thought that has not materialized in, I don't know how many years, Jeff just described it, but it's one of those things.
Are we
that-
talking monthly? We talking quarterly? We talking semi-annually?
No, I'm open to monthly or quarterly, unless also, anybody else have any other thoughts?
I like quarterly. I think monthly
Fine
is
with
a little
quarterly?
onerous.
I think quarterly is fine. I think that's the appropriate level of detail for us to engage in. Monthly, I think, is too much, unless
what-
it was an
I
extraordinary
agree with that.
amount.
And what we're looking for is a summarized version, not a specific hour-by-hour accounting, right?
Well, I would, if in fact he's expending over the 30 hours, that's some indication of that. The excess in 30 hours where it's being spent, maybe we need to adjust the contract.
We haven't asked him for that consideration, and if we owe him more money, I have no doubt that we will live up to that obligation.
Okay.
I mean, it may be a win-win for both of us, although I don't want to impose any unrealistic reporting requirements on the firm because they probably have plenty to do from day to day as it is.
Yeah, I think quarterly is reasonable. As someone who, as a non-attorney, spent 5 years at a law firm and had to learn how to account for my time in 15-minute intervals, I learned, but that's how they all worked.
I would be fine with quarterly.
Myself, Jack, you too? Okay. All right, I think we've got a consensus on that. So do we need to adjust the language then, probably, just to be clear?
One word, I think.
Saying monthly or saying quarterly versus monthly?
Is the reference right there where we can look at it?
Yeah.
On page 2,
Detailed
bottom of page 2.
Detailed report, including hours, by the 15th of the month following, I would say to be 2 words, of the quarter following.
The
quarter of service.
A summarized report of the services provided under this agreement, including the hours of service by category or project, shall be submitted to the village manager quarterly.
Yeah, following the 15th of the end of the quarter, if that's appropriate.
I think staff can capture those words and understand the intent there and change the contract. So I think when we make the motion, all we need to do is note that with adjustments to the reporting structure as specified by staff.
And the intent of this, as I'm hearing, just to make sure we're clear on this, is that we have a contract that correctly identifies what the expectations are from the village attorney, and that appropriate billing is going for that. He's being paid for anything extra, and we're justifying the 30 hours per month to, basically, if it's not measured, it's not managed type of thing.
Correct.
Okay.
The
That's what-
billing aspect is up to him.
If I could recommend, rather than say quarterly, say at least quarterly, so that if he does need to bill us on a monthly basis because he's gone over, then he can do that.
That's
a
fine.
good point.
That's fine.
And there's another provision in there that also we've kind of walked away from, and that's that there's reference to a letter that describes his hourly rate. To my knowledge, that also hasn't, that letter has never been included.
No, it used to appear.
Yes.
We've-
But the hourly rate is actually in the language of the contract now. So
Right.
we could just strike that reference to that letter, and I think we'd be okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's right, it is in the contract. Yeah.
And Jeff, are there any other issues that come to mind here of the law of unintended consequences that this change is potentially going to cause?
Not that I can or that I can think of.
Right now.
Okay, just want to make sure if it's coming across your,
Conversation with Mike and see if he's okay with this, but we'll see.
he has to sign it also.
I guess we've established, Jeff, you are now in charge of the law of unintended consequences.
And responsible for them.
Yeah, yes, whatever they may be. Okay. All right, I think we've have a conclusion there, so
We need a motion there to approve it. yeah.
motion to adopt.
Okay, I move to approve the contract for legal services with Van Camp, Meacham and Newman, PLLC, for fiscal year 2025, with revisions as described in the council meeting, and that will be developed by staff.
We have a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So adopted, and compliments to our village attorney for the fine work he has done in the past. Thank you. All right, we are on to item 10, or 11, I guess now, because we had Jeff Benton. Discuss and consider ordinance 2410, amending the library expansion capital project fund budget. Dana, go right ahead.
Yeah, so at the last council meeting, you approved the amendment to the Oakley Collier Architects contract for the library design services, increasing the total contract to $600,900. The capital project fund budget currently has $400,500 budgeted for the design services. So we need to increase that budget line item to be able to execute and issue the purchase order to Oakley Collier. This budget amendment that's being proposed is just to take money out of the construction line and add it to the design line at this point in time, not to increase the overall budget. We will do that later once we know what we need to increase the overall budget to, or have a better idea in terms of accommodating the construction cost. So at this point in time, we're just moving $200,400 from the construction cost budget line to the design cost to be able to issue the purchase order to Oakley Collier for this contract that was approved.
Okay, and we would issue that in this fiscal year?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Any questions from council?
No, we approved this contract last time, right?
We're now officially
Or just
approving the financial.
The budget amendment. to-
allocating the money into what we already approved.
Yeah. Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve ordinance 2410, amending the library expansion capital project fund budget.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Now we go on to Resolution 24-22, amendments to the Service Awards and Retirement Recognitions Policy. Angie, welcome.
Good afternoon. So I am here representing the Policy Committee, which consists of all of our department heads plus one rotating staff member. And we have reviewed the Service Awards and Retirement Gifts Policy, which is a council policy, so it needs your approval. And we have a couple of minor changes to that policy. So the primary change to the policy comes with when we award the retirement gifts. So we do this every 5 years, 5, 10, 15, 20, et cetera, and only on those milestone years. So right now, when someone hits those milestones, they're awarded their retirement gift, or their service award, or retirement gift in December. And we would like to modify that so that when someone hits that service milestone, that they're awarded that gift in the pay period where they hit the milestone. So if somebody gets 30 years of service in February, they don't have to wait necessarily until December to receive the money. Although we will continue to recognize them in December at our Christmas party. So that is one change we want to make.
What's the range of the award amounts that we usually recognize here?
It's $50 a year. So for 5 years, it's $250, I think that is.
Okay,
I've got it in front of me right here.
Goes up 250 every 5 years.
Yes,
okay.
that's exactly right. Yep. So, and those amounts wouldn't necessarily change, except
I saw there was one, that's why.
for
I
the
asked.
35 and 40 years, we had that capped at $1,500 for the last 2 years. And so just being consistent with the $250 increments, we would like to, in 35 years, increase that to $1,750, and 40 years, increase that to $2,000. I've been here 15 years, and no one has ever hit those last two milestones.
I was wondering about that.
Now, Jeff Batten has come close, and we have somebody else who's coming close, but no one has hit those years.
40 years, wow.
I know, right?
We want to maybe increase that 40-year award amount.
We've
Right.
barely been incorporated 40 years.
That's right.
Jeez.
That's why no one's qualified.
Yeah.
Qualified, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So those are the two changes that we want to recommend to this policy.
These are all taxable income, is that correct?
That is correct.
I'll entertain any discussion from council members. Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 2422, amendments to the Service Awards and Retirement Recognition Policy.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion adopted.
Thank you.
Go ahead and spend that money. Okay, now we are on to item 13, which is other business. I'll toss it open to my colleagues. Go right down the line. Dr. Morgan, anything you'd like to bring up? No.
Two things very quickly. I probably could have done one of them in my report earlier. This is the presentation that was given at the Moore County Board of Commissioners meeting on their investigation on water. I don't think there is really much of anything in here that is new. I would point out one misunderstanding that I was under. on, let's see, where did it go? Oh, on page 6 of the handout, slide 12, the first recommended next step is preliminary engineering report representing a 10% design document. I thought that had already been approved. I spoke with Randy Gould afterwards. It has not. He suspects that that will come up for consideration later this summer at the board level. The second thing is there was as we know, there was, and as we discussed when Mr. Gould was here, there was the suggestion of as much as an 11% increase in water rates beginning July 1st. That has been scaled back to 3.5%. Although this document indicates that the board was being asked to approve that, they did not
yet.
actually vote on that at this meeting. They need to do so prior to June 20th. It has to be incorporated into their budget, and June 20th is their budget approval meeting. Other than that, there's not really much that was different in here. I'm obviously, rather than taking up time, happy to talk with anyone on the sideline about that. The second thing, when they called for commentary on the Senate Bill 166, representatives from Jackson Hamlet got up and made a complaint about one of the 3 roads in Jackson Hamlet and the accessibility of fire services there, and whether or not a particular fire hydrant had actually been tested. And the allegation was that Pinehurst was in somehow derelict in our duties there. I spoke to the gentleman afterwards. I said I didn't know, but I expected that I would be seeing the fire chief this afternoon, which I did. And he had actually an excellent response, no surprise there. So thank you, Chief Cole. And I will just summarize by saying the hydrant is in fact not ours, it is the county's hydrant. And unfortunately, the road is not ours either, and so the conditions of the road are not our responsibility. But I did want to acknowledge Chief Cole for having responded on that. Nothing further.
I believe it's a private road.
What is it, Jeff?
I believe it's a private road.
Private.
But beyond the sign that says the state no longer does maintenance, yes, I'm quite sure it's a private road there. So. And that's where the fire hydrant is located.
If this is one of the few complaints that the commissioners have received that was reported by another person who was at that meeting, relative to ETJs.
They didn't, I mean, they complained we don't have an ETJ because we are landlocked. So although it came up in the discussion of ETJ, I don't think it was actually germane to that particular part of the conversation. But in any event, I will respond back to the gentleman. He sent me his contact information and
Great.
try to point him in the right direction. So be helpful in that regard.
Councilman Farrell, any? Barbara Ficklin? Okay. I have a couple items, but they're more for the work session as to other business, rather opposed to right now. Let us now, hearing nothing else on other business, let us go to comments from attendees. So we'll start again with Joe Busher. No comments at all. Okay.
Well, I think we ought to remind Joe that when we get into the work session, we generally don't entertain comments, so this may be an opportune,
Yeah,
this may be an opportune time for us to hear your comments.
that's a very good point, Jack. So please come forward if you have some comments and share them.
Might not be opportune, it might be only.
Yes, state your name into the microphone and so forth, and your address.
My name is Joe Busher. I'm the president of the Royal Oak Townhome Association, here representing that group. Our vice president, Wilson Meyer, I don't think he made it yet. Our secretary is Patricia Notaro. She's sitting right there. Our treasurer is Tina Coxon. And our communication manager is Mary Flynn, who's here. But first of all, I want to thank everyone for the consideration that we've put in front of the board as far as helping us with our roads in the future. I want to thank Mike Apke for his detailed report on our community. He gave us a very, very detailed report on all the things that we would need to bring up to code before the Village of Pinehurst took over the roads. We are proud Pinehurst tax-paying citizens, and we love being part of the community of Pinehurst. We're in attendance today to ask for your support to maintain the roads in Royal Oak and to provide us guidance on the work that needs to be done to bring everything up to code. I think the biggest issue is we're only 40 homeowners and we're not quite sure how we could afford to maintain those roads now or in the future. If 20 years from now, those roads would have to be resurfaced, I'm not quite sure where the funds would come from. So that's our plea and our concern. We did have several questions. I don't know if you want me to ask these now or if we get in the working session.
You can raise them right now.
Okay. First one is, will the village give us the ability to bring it up to code? And how long do we have to comply to that code? So if you do accept that we bring it back, how long do we have to get all those things addressed? The other question we had was, why didn't the engineer who inspected this community hold the builder and the developer to code for the Pinehurst streets? I know that the developer said, hey, it's going to be private, but why the heck wouldn't he try to at least build it to code for future work? Let's see, I don't think. The other question I had from someone on the board was, we pay Pinehurst taxes, we receive trash pickup as a result. Now that construction is complete, the largest, heaviest truck with the highest chance to cause damage is the garbage truck. Right? And it'll be regularly on our street. So our taxes are paying for the service and protection from this service. So what do we do if one of those trucks damage our street? A couple of the codes that were addressed in the report, they're really not fixable. One was 50-foot right-of-way between buildings. We can't move our buildings, so we can't very well fix that. And there's some pipes that go through some sewer drains. We're not quite sure why they did that, but it's not anything that would affect resurfacing a road in our mind. And then the last question we had was, what would be the procedure to amend any ordinance on requirements of public roads for small communities? And that's really a question of, if this happens again, what can that community do to protect themselves against having to pay to resurface roads over the years? The other question we had is, if we do have to keep them, is there someone, engineer, someone that can come to us and say, here's how you're supposed to maintain those roads? What do you need to do to resurface over time? What is all that work that needs to be done? So we're a brand new community. We're very proud to be part of the community. All 40 properties have been sold. There's one left that has to be closed. The community is working together right now to beautify the community. They've planted trees, put down pine straw, redid sod in several roads. So your comment about making the community beautiful, we're working on that in our community right now. So, and if any of you have not come through our community, please come by, knock on my door, and happy to walk you around. But we're very proud of our community. We're very concerned about the expense of the roads if we have to take care of them. So that's really our plea to the council.
Just a quick question, how old is your community, Soy?
What's that?
How old is the community?
It started, it's about 4 years old, but it took 4 years to complete everything due to COVID issues. So it was a 2-year, I think it was a 2-year business plan that took 4 years, but we're done now.
I get you. Thank you. Joe, thank you very much,
Thank you.
and appreciate you giving us those questions to think about when we get into a discussion later.
One more thing, anything on my board? Did I miss anything, or does anybody like to add anything? No? Okay, good, I did my job.
How about Backspin Lane has no comments? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. I will entertain a motion to briefly adjourn.
I move to adjourn the regular meeting.
Okay,
Second.
motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's regroup at 6:15.